Okay, so we're going to discuss, as I sent out in the text, we're a couple days behind the Tanya. We're holding the second half of chapter 10 in Tanya. I want to actually share something with you guys about it before I do that, something fascinating. We're dealing with a very interesting problem in Hashem creating the world. We're dealing with a very interesting problem that he's trying to explain in this chapter of Tanya. On the one hand, we want to say that Hashem is infinite beyond any kind of details, separation, form, shape. Hashem is infinite beyond everything else. Now, on the other hand, we want to say that Hashem is running the world in the great detail. So he came up with an interesting idea, which he's starting to discuss in chapter 10, I think also in 11 we're going to talk about, is that, so we have to say that Hashem created the world with wisdom. Without getting to all the details, we're saying that Hashem created the world with wisdom, but how can Hashem have wisdom if wisdom is a nuance, a detail, a part, some kind of shape, color, whatever, it's some kind of description of God. If God's infinite and really one, how could he have a description of wisdom? So that's why in the English he uses a lot of times the word emanate. It's a very good word to use. The light, as he said in Tanya, the last class we had, comes from the luminary. It comes out of the light bulb. It comes out of the sun. When that light is in the luminary, is in the light bulb, it's in the sun, it's part of the sun. It's not light. It isn't light. It's part of the sun. Only after it leaves the sun does it turn into an object called light. You may want to call it a gas in the sun. Whatever you want to call it, it's not light. So it's very interesting. There's no definition to it as it's in the sun. So wisdom comes from Hashem, but it doesn't appear as wisdom when it's within Hashem. When it comes out of Hashem, it all of a sudden appears as wisdom. So in God himself, there's no detail of wisdom. It's beyond any comprehension of what we would say. Hashem knows. It doesn't use our way of knowing to know things, so it's not called wisdom. Because wisdom already has a definition to it. Hashem can't have definition because then he's not the truly idea of infinite and truly one, a true idea of oneness. So something can emanate from Hashem that now has features and characteristics, but it doesn't have it as it appears in Hashem before it emanated from God. So the word emanate's a very good word to describe this because it emanated from something else. But Hashem needed to create the physical world in details, in a nuanced way. And therefore Hashem created, as we're going to learn today, 10 sayings with which he used to create the world. And the 10 sayings express 10 emotions that Hashem uses in the world. Let's see it inside today. You'll see this idea in the Tanya we're discussing today. Okay. So for example, on the first day of creation, of the 6 days of creation, God created the world in 6 days. Because each day represented another energy. So the first attribute that Hashem used to create the world is Nigles Midas HaChesed, was a revelation of the characteristic of kindness, which makes sense. The first day of creation, Hashem wants to create the world, used a great emphasis on kindness, which just wants to give. It's like people want to give. So this is an example. The rabbi wants to talk, or the parent wants to give. It's a natural instinct that people have. Hashem wants to give, use the character of kindness in the first day of creation. Now, however, don't think it was one-track minded. It was just that character of kindness, that everything was one-track kindness. No, each of the 6 days of creation, the characteristic included all the 6 days, but that was the main character. Included the other characters, the character of severity and the character of splendor, whatever it is. Now, when that character comes out, let's say kindness, together with part and parcel of that character is intellect. Why? Why, when you have a character, the emotion of kindness, do you have to have intellect? He's going to explain that in today's Tanya. Because let's take a human being. You want to be kind to someone else. How do you want to be kind to someone else? How much do you want to be kind to somebody else, right? That all needs to be interpreted with your intellect. So an emotion will require intellect in order to use that emotion to get somewhere with it. You could be kind by giving someone just asking, they want to give someone else a gift. Should they give them a check or should they give them a book? What would be a better way for the gift to come? So now the person's using intellect in order to decide what's the best way for the gift to be. How much should the gift be? So even if you want to use the emotion of kindness, it's got to then operate the brain or the idea of intellect in order for it to come about. So the first day was kindness. What did Hashem create on the first day of creation? Created light. That was created on the first day of creation. Which is a beautiful way to represent kindness. It's God giving light to the world. Very much identifies with what God wanted to do. He wanted to give. He wanted to shine. He wanted to give us light. And the light spread out from one end, from the higher dynamic of the world, into our world, and from one end of the world to the other world, which represents the idea of kindness. Hashem created light. However, if Hashem would create just kindness, just light, you know what would happen? There would be an unbearable, tremendous, huge amount of, infinite amount of light without any limitations to it. So therefore, it's very good that it's not one-track minded, not just one-track kindness, but it also includes the second day's attribute and emotion, which is Gvura. It also includes in it the attribute of severity, of limitation, of not just giving, but let me not give unless the person deserves. Therefore, it wasn't spiritual light. So had God just said, let me shine the light, you know what kind of light it would have been? It would have been a very spiritual light. But then came the second day energy, mixed in with the first day energy, because all the energies are mixing with each other, and it limited the light to then be some kind of human form, materialistic kind of light. And it also dressed into our physical world, which our world, our bottom world, is a limited, materialistic, very physical, very limited kind of world. And he says, where do we see that the world is limited? Well, it would take 500 years to walk. The artist of Rakia from land to the sky, so the heavens, I don't know, however many miles away, to walk from east to south. Our world is built in a way of limitation. It takes up a certain amount of space, a certain amount of weight, it's a certain amount of distance. Everything is limited in our physical world. Had the light been just given without any limitation, it would just have been an infinite amount of spiritual energy of light. It wouldn't have been a physical light. But then because there's a second day of creation, which is Gvura, which is limitation, now the light takes on nuances and limitations. What happened? What did Hashem create on the second day of creation? Glad you asked. What happened on the second day? Something will happen that will reveal the energy of limitation. Now it will not be just limitation, because it'll only be klulim. Hashem made this it'll include God, the other characteristics too, and God's will. So what happened on the second day of creation? That's identified with this energy. Hashem created the heavens on the second day of creation. But with what words did God use? Let there be a heavens within the water. Let's separate the waters, the upper waters and the lower waters. As he wants to explain here in Tanya, what does that mean to separate between the upper waters and the lower waters? The spiritual waters and the physical waters. Some commentaries, I think we want to say it's the clouds and the water and the earth, but the meaning of the way Tanya is understanding it here is the spiritual dimension of creation, which was water, which is that Hashem is godliness is everywhere. And the whole idea of the second day is limitation, is let's remove godliness from here, let's remove it and create a limited physical world, a materialistic world. We got to move out the spiritual heavens so not everybody could see it. Which is limitation, contraction, and Gvura, strength, severity. To separate the upper world from the lower world. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's not. You might say it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. Because what are we saying the whole time? You cannot exist as long as you're within your source. Light does not exist as long as it's within the sun. It has no identity. You want to exist, we got to move out the upper energy in order that the materialistic world could become a material world. Through removing the upper heavens, meaning the spiritual dimension of the heavens, the world became materialistic, became separated, became physical. Being separated from the upper water. So the upper worlds, the dimension was disappeared, taken away, and our world came to exist in a very limited, physical, materialistic way, in a very limited way. Now, the second day, which is created again with this limitation, removing spirituality, removing the revelation of godliness so that we could exist, was that a bad thing or a good thing? So you might first say it was a bad thing. Why was it a bad thing? Because we don't see God anymore in the world. Yeah, but if we wouldn't, it's really a good thing because we want you to exist. You wouldn't exist if not. And Hashem also created the world with kindness. because it's really a kind thing that I'm allowing the human being to exist in order that there could be a physical world and that he could serve Hashem. So everything has a dimension, a dynamic of giving, and the dimension of limitation. That's a healthy lifestyle. So this is what Elijah the prophet says in the Kabbalah, in the book of Tikkunim. He says, Hashem created the world in a way, energies within the world that are kind of limited, so you could see how Hashem runs the world in a kind and just, righteous kind of way. Hashem uses some mercy, Hashem uses some severity, so that we could see how Hashem is running the world. So Hashem wants to have a relationship with us. He wants us to exist as physical creations. So we created 10 energies to manage the world, and he managed the world through them in order that there should be some oversight and existence of us physical creatures within this very physical world. However, all these emotions and attributes that God is using to create the world are not similar to our emotions and our attributes. They're completely beyond the limited creation of the world. So God does run a system through limitations that the world could exist and run in a very limited way. And each day is considered another attribute. And through that attribute, Hashem manages the world using those 6 attributes that Hashem created. In 6 days, Hashem created the world. However, at the same time that Hashem created this whole system of running the world in a limited way, they don't reflect God himself, because how the light is in the luminary, it actually doesn't exist. It just emanated from God to manage the world. But even the ways that they're emanated from God to manage the world are completely beyond their comprehension. They're used to manage the world, but not in the way we understand our limited emotions within ourselves. They're still very different. They're just terms we're using to help us understand how Hashem runs the world. We're going to leave it at that. I have to run. But any quick questions or comments on today's Tanya? If not, we will, Emirz Hashem, God willing, start